My name is Eleanor, and right now I'm seated inside a lakeside cabin, surrounded by a stillness that feels weighted, as though the air itself is holding back secrets. The water outside murmurs softly against the shore, the only sound breaking through the quiet. Not long ago, I uncovered something about my husband, David, something that has completely shattered everything I believe to be true. David and I built what most people would call an ordinary life. We owned a modest home in the Chicago suburbs. He spent his days crunching numbers as an accountant, and I spent mine shaping young minds as a school teacher. Our daughter Lily had grown up and thrown herself into her career in New York. Life moved in familiar, comfortable cycles: family dinners, weekend errands, the steady hum of routine. After we buried David, I returned to a house that no longer felt like home. His shirt still hung in the closet. His books still lined the shelf. Yet every room felt hollow, like a stage set after the actors have gone. The medical bills arrived quickly, stacking up faster than I could manage, and our savings began to disappear. The one thing we still had of value was a small cabin nestled in the Colorado mountains. David had always protected that property fiercely, even though we almost never discussed it. He would drive up on weekends alone, claiming, "But with our finances deteriorating, I knew the cabin had to go." I called a real estate agent and scheduled a visit to discuss listing it. When I hung up the phone, something gnawed at me, a quiet but persistent sense that I was making a mistake. Still, I saw no other option. In the days that followed, I drifted through memories of our years together. David had never been a man who expressed himself easily with words, but he showed up, consistently, reliably, without complaint. We had a good marriage, or so I had always believed. Looking back now, I can see when things began to shift. In his final years, David started leaving every Friday evening and not returning until late Sunday night. The city wore him out, he said. He craved the silence of the mountains. I didn't push back. I had my own demands. A full teaching schedule and the ongoing care of my aging mother. I had little energy left for questions. Then the cough appeared. Dry and persistent, it followed him everywhere. He called it allergies, then a stubborn cold. He moved slower than before and sat down more often, and I told myself it was stress and age catching up with him. One morning, I walked into the bathroom and found him with a completely shaved head. Low maintenance, he said. Plenty of men his age did the same. Whenever I asked about his health, he had a calm, reasonable answer ready. Nothing serious, just something the doctor was monitoring. I believed him. I had always believed him. Lily drifted further from us during those years, consumed first by school and then by work. Visits shrank to phone calls, holidays grew shorter. I told myself children grow up, that this was natural. But I'll admit there were moments when I resented David's weekend trips to the cabin, when I felt like he was choosing solitude over his own family. There were evenings I spoke to him sharply and he would simply absorb my frustration without a word. I mistook that silence for distance. I was so very wrong. When the real estate agent and I arrived at the cabin, I was struck immediately by how well kept it looked. The lawn was neatly trimmed, the porch was swept, the windows were spotless. Someone had been caring for this place regularly. Before we could begin the walkthrough, a neighbor named Henry emerged from the adjoining property. David had mentioned him once or twice in passing. When the agent explained that we were there to list the cabin for sale, Henry's face shifted, concern replacing his usual expression. He asked me to wait. He said there were things I needed to know first. I followed him into the woods behind the cabin, unease growing with every step. We reached a small storage shed tucked among the trees. It was secured with several heavy locks, all of them new and well-maintained. When Henry opened the door, I stood frozen in the entrance. Inside was a carefully organized medical space. An oxygen concentrator hummed quietly on one side. A portable IV stand stood nearby. The shelves were lined with medications, bandages, and supplies, everything arranged with deliberate precision. It was unmistakably a place designed for ongoing medical treatment. Then Henry told me what he knew. 3 years earlier, David had collapsed near the dock. He refused to let Henry call an ambulance, insisting on driving himself to a clinic instead. After extensive testing, he received a diagnosis: advanced cancer. David made a decision that day. He would not tell me. He would not tell Lily. He was convinced that the truth would derail our lives, fill our days with fear and grief. So he chose to carry it alone. Every weekend at the cabin was not an escape, it was treatment. He managed his illness in secret, carefully controlling what we saw so that life at home could continue undisturbed. The shaved head finally made sense. He had done it before we could notice the hair loss ourselves. He was managing the narrative, protecting us from the truth written on his own body. Sitting down in that small room, I felt guilt descend on me like something physical. I had been so absorbed in my own world that I had missed everything he was enduring. I had misread his silence as neglect, his withdrawal as indifference, and all along he had been quietly fighting for his life, and for ours. In one of the drawers, I found his journal, tucked inside a plain canvas cover. I opened it with trembling hands and found his handwriting staring back at me. The early entries were almost clinical: symptoms, dosages, treatment schedules. But as the pages progressed, his voice grew softer and more personal. He wrote about his terror of becoming dependent, of watching me reorganize my life around his decline. He described managing his pain carefully so it wouldn't show on his face. He wrote about the weight of the choice he had made. The short, sharp pain of a confession weighed against the prolonged suffering he was determined to spare us. Reading those pages, I felt like I was meeting my husband for the first time. His silence had never been indifference. It had been devotion. Lily arrived at the cabin later that afternoon. When she learned I had canceled the sale, she was furious. I brought her to the shed without saying much and let the room speak first. She resisted it, insisted there had to be some misunderstanding, that her father would never have hidden something like this from his own family. Then I handed her the journal. She read in silence, and then she wept. We ended up on the floor together, leaning against each other. The years of quiet resentment, the frustration, the feeling of being left out, began to dissolve. We both understood now. David hadn't chosen the cabin over us. He had chosen it for us. We also found a legal document he had prepared. In it, David outlined a request that the cabin be converted into a short-term retreat for cancer patients. He had written carefully about the need for a calm, dignified space where patients could rest and recover outside the clinical coldness of a hospital setting. He had envisioned all of this. Even while facing death, he was building something for others. We decided without hesitation to honor it. We reached out to the doctor David had named in his journal. He agreed immediately and brought others with him: a nurse, a social worker. Patients began arriving, worn down, and in need of somewhere gentle to land. We offered them quiet rooms, simple meals, and the willingness to listen. Over time, Lily changed. The career path she had mapped out in New York began to feel insufficient compared to what she saw happening at the cabin. She shifted direction, choosing healthcare so she could offer others what her father had quietly spent his final years building. The grief I had been carrying began to transform. It didn't leave. It reshaped itself into something I could carry more purposefully. The absence of David became less of a wound and more of a compass. Now, sitting here by the water, I watch the lake and I think of him. The silence that once felt like a barrier between us now feels like an embrace. It speaks of a man who loved so deeply that he carried an unbearable weight rather than place it on the people he cherished most. That love doesn't end with a life. It goes on building things long after the builder is gone.